What if the one person that you loved most wasn't even able to feel that love? I'm Dre, and this is the Midnight Hour. Tonight, we will be looking at a very short story, first published in the New Yorker in 1948, called Symbols and Signs by Russian writer Vladimir Nabokov. And this is a very short story, only a few pages long. And it's an incredibly heart-wrenching, heartbreaking story about a couple who are a little bit older and whose son is in a mental institute. Now, the story goes that he has been in this institute for 4 years at the beginning of this story. And his birthday is coming up, though his parents don't know what to bring him for his birthday, because anything that they do bring him could trigger him into a certain type of madness, a certain type of episode. And it kind of goes back into their past and their history, the family's history. And eventually, the husband and wife go to the hospital to visit their son. Once there, they're unable to actually see him because a nurse comes out and tells them that he has attempted to take his own life and that maybe seeing his parents would be too much for him at this moment. When they arrive home, the husband comes into the living room and basically pleads his case for bringing their son back home. As he's saying this to his wife, the telephone rings. She answers, and it says that a girl's dull voice says to her, "Can I speak to Charlie?" The wife says, "There is no one here by that name. You have the wrong number." She hangs up, and she feels so relieved that it wasn't anything worse. But the phone rings a second time. And again, there's someone on the line that asks if they can speak to Charlie. She sits down next to her husband on the couch as they continue pondering what to actually get their son for his birthday when the telephone rings a third time, and that is how the story ends. Now, I pretty much have done what I always do and highlighted 3 parts that I think really sum this story up in a nice, succinct way. The first one is the first paragraph of the story, and it goes: For the 4th time in as many years, they were confronted with the problem of what birthday present to take to a young man who was incurably deranged in his mind. Desires he had none. Man-made objects were to him either hives of evil, vibrant with a malignant activity that he alone could perceive, or gross comforts for which no use could be found in his abstract world. After eliminating a number of articles that might offend him or frighten him, anything in the gadget line, for instance, was taboo, his parents chose a dainty and innocent trifle: a basket with 10 different fruit jellies in 10 little jars. So that pretty much sums everything up that we really would need in a first paragraph in a story like this. It pretty much shows the hopelessness of the situation where the parents aren't even sure of what to bring their son for his birthday. So they decide to just bring him these 10 little jars of jelly because anything else is too much. Now imagine the weight the parents must feel in that situation. The second quote is a little bit longer, so we're going to get right into this one. And it basically just goes over his actual condition, the son's actual condition. And it says, "The system of his delusions had been the subject of an elaborate paper in a scientific monthly, which the doctor at the sanitarium had given to them to read. But long before that, she and her husband had puzzled it out for themselves. Referential mania, the article had called it. In these very rare cases, the patient imagines that everything happening around him is a veiled reference to his personality and existence. He excludes real people from the conspiracy because he considers himself to be so much more intelligent than other men. Phenomenal nature shadows him wherever he goes. Clouds in the staring sky transmit to each other, by means of slow signs, incredibly detailed information regarding him. His inmost thoughts are discussed at nightfall, in manual alphabet, by darkly gesticulating trees. Pebbles or stains or sunflecks form patterns representing, in some awful way, messages that he must intercept. Everything is a cipher, and of everything he is the theme. All around him there are spies. Some of them are detached observers, like glass surfaces and still pools. Others, such as coats in store windows, are prejudiced witnesses, lynchers at heart. Others, again, running water, storms, are hysterical to the point of insanity, have a distorted opinion of him, and grotesquely misinterpret his actions. He must be always on his guard and devote every minute and module of life to the decoding of the undulation of things. The very air he exhales is indexed and filed away. If only the interest he provokes were limited to his immediate surroundings, but alas, it is not. Now imagine having to live that way. Imagine being so within your own mind and trapped within your own abstract world that nothing but your immediate filter makes sense to you. And maybe not even then. Maybe your own abstract world is so abstract to you even that you have no way out. Now, upon returning home, the wife sits and examines some photographs of her family and begins to think of all the things that they have gone through. And the third highlighted section really sums this up in a perfect way. And it says, all this and much more she had accepted. For, after all, living does mean accepting the loss of one joy after another. Not even joys in her case, mere possibilities of improvement. She thought of the recurrent waves of pain that for some reason or other she and her husband had had to endure. Of the invisible giants hurting her boy in some unimaginable fashion. Of the incalculable amount of tenderness contained in the world. Of the fate of that tenderness, which is either crushed or wasted, or transformed into madness. Of neglected children humming to themselves in unswept corners, of beautiful weeds that cannot hide from the farmer. So I really can't imagine the amount of heartbreak she must feel, especially at the age she feels it at. Now, the story does mention she and her husband are immigrants. They have come from Russia to America, to New York, and upon coming here, were so humiliated and were so shamed for their son's condition that they pretty much resolved to leaning on one another instead of anybody else. The only other family member who is actually named is the husband's brother, whose name is Isaac, though they call him the Prince because he is a little bit more well off than they are. So it implies that he is the one paying for their son's institutionalization. So that pretty much tells you that they are at the end of their rope. They have nobody else to go to. It's not like they want to go to the husband's brother. They don't want to go to Isaac, but they have no other option, and they're trying as hard as they can to save their only child. Now, to come back to the initial question of the night, what would it be like if the one person you loved most wasn't even able to feel that love? I ask that because if their son is so wrapped up in his own mind, does he even realize the amount of pressure and misery which his situation has piled onto his parents? And the answer is probably not. Because for as tragic and as sad as his situation is, I think what really speaks to me about this story are the parents. They are in a brand new country and they have to deal with this horrible situation on top of everything. They're poor. They have run out of resources and they only have each other to lean on. And who knows for how much longer, even. So that was the summation for tonight's story. I just think these types of stories are so heart-wrenching because they are so real and they don't rely on fantasy elements. They aren't too surreal. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but this approach that Nabokov has taken with this story just speaks so loudly. Now, the ending remains a mystery. Nabokov never really says who Charlie is, though it has been pointed out to me in the past that their son might call his father Charlie, or that might be the nickname for him. So when they receive this phone call, something might have happened. Something might have happened at the hospital, and they are calling to find and tell Charlie about it. And while it's a tragic ending, I think that would make more sense than it just being a wrong number. Why would it be in this story, if for not a deeper purpose? Next week, we're going to lighten things up much more and actually attend a very upscale dinner party that entails very interesting guests and some not so interesting, and having to choose between the two crowds. So like if you felt something, comment if you wrote something, and I will see you next Sunday at the midnight hour.